And we often have talked about we every time you come on, we talk about some interesting thing that cannabis or CBD does for the body. And today is going to continue that conversation, but we're talking about reproductive rights and CBD. There's a whole lot of people in the audience who have questions, I'm sure, and hopefully we'll get a chance to cover some of this today. So let's talk about cannabis and reproductive rights. What are some of the top line things we should know?
So this is an interesting topic because we've mentioned pregnancy and cannabis, and we've discussed that. We've discussed postpartum,
Hmm.
and then we've discussed some things that are not directly related, but are related in terms of, let's say, we've discussed pain, mood, and those type of things, right? And so when we look at reproductive rights, right, and we're talking about, this is very important because it's an election year. So
Yeah.
this is on the ballot. In our state, it's on the ballot, right? And of course, federally, who gets the Supreme Court justices, who gets to nominate Supreme Court justices, makes a big, big difference in how those rights are applied or interpreted.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you're in Florida, so you guys just got this amendment or this ballot initiative, I believe,
yeah,
because right now you have a 6 week abortion ban. After 6 weeks, that's
correct,
it. Yeah. So
correct.
it literally is on your ballot in Florida, and it's on all of our ballots in some way, shape, or another, because whoever gets the presidency will get the Supreme Court picks, which means that they will also help to determine the future of reproductive rights.
Absolutely. And so the reason that we have, like you mentioned, we talk about interesting stuff, and a lot of it comes from my clinical experience, like what are my patients or customers calling and asking about. And so we were going to discuss today originally because this is a big month for births in the year because everyone's been making love in November and December.
Oh, that's
It's
right. Full
right.
of love in December, the holiday
It's
season,
the
cuddle
holiday.
buddies and cuffing season. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
right. So originally we were to discuss pregnancy and hyperemesis and like a bunch of things. And I got a call a few weeks ago from a patient of mine
Mm.
who had to leave Florida to go get some reproductive care to have an abortion. So she had a high risk pregnancy. She already had two kids. She was, older person.
Mm.
Uh, and the baby was found to have, the fetus was found to have an anomaly
Mm.
which was, life threatening to it, but
Wow.
not to the mom.
Yeah.
And so, what she told me was when she saw her gynecologist in high risk pregnancy, their advice was that to terminate the pregnancy, which she had to then, chew on herself and figure out what she was going to do. And
Yeah.
so after some time, she decided, and she was separated from her husband on top of that.
Oh
So
wow.
after some time, yeah, decided that she was going to go through this, but she couldn't do it in Florida because it was after the 6 months, 6 weeks.
Mm.
So she had to go all the way to Colorado and get,
Jesus.
yeah, she had to go to Colorado. So supposedly, and I didn't know, I'm learning this as she's telling me, as Colorado is one of the states that openly provides care for people from other states. And they have like a little network of clinics and resources that you can use to help like travel. Some of it even like cover the costs. And so she had to go through this whole thing, leave the state, go over there, get a procedure done, and then fly back home
Mm.
after the procedure by herself.
Mm.
And what she called me was she was in unbelievable amounts of pain, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
obviously, if you have a procedure, everyone reacts differently. She's in a whole lot of pain, but emotionally and spiritually, she was hurting as well, right? And so it was kind of like I just went through this really difficult experience in my life,
Yeah.
and this is what's going on with me. And she was like, one of the first things I want to know is it after having a procedure like this, is it okay for me to start consuming my cannabis or CBD again? Because I'm in a whole lot of pain and I need something for my mood. All right, so that was the gist of it, and that's how we got across this topic and talking to her and really focusing on these reproductive rights because there are a lot of things that overlap within cannabis use and people who use CBD and how applications of the law can impact people's lives without them even knowing in the future this is going to make a big impact on how you're going to live and experience your walk on this planet.
Mm. That's powerful. And I just want to, if we can, just for a moment, sit in this space, because the idea that people are making decisions to have abortion just willy nilly is laughably ridiculous, but very painful for people who have to consider what, especially. And I'm so glad that you were able to give us a little bit of context about what this patient was going through, because to already be a mom is a position that many people who have abortion experience. They are already mothers, they're already parenting children. And to be in a situation where she's pregnant, the father is no longer present, they're separated and divorcing, depending on what state she's in, she would not have been able to get a divorce while she was pregnant, right? She would have, and depending if she's in Missouri, that's not happening. And so having to flee your state, incur the cost, find childcare for the children you already have and love, wrestle with the idea that perhaps you did not want to have this abortion, but your circumstances will not allow you to make another decision, particularly because this fetus has now been determined to have an anomaly that will threaten its life. There is so much emotional turmoil that people have to go through. And that's just, and I'm sure there are other people who have an abortion or have to consider having an abortion, and maybe there's not the emotional energetic behind it. I don't want to suggest that all people with the uterus approach this decision in the
Mhm.
same way. But it's really important for people to know most of the people having abortions are already parents, and their financial or life circumstances do not allow them to add a whole ass other human being that they will be responsible for the rest of their lives, and the lives of that human being don't have the ability to do it. And so I appreciate the sensitivity that we are able to tap into by virtue of the fact that you have shared with us some context about her, because I think what she went through is something that a lot of the people who have to make this decision are very similarly situated.
That's exactly it. I'm here, I'm listening to this story, obviously, as a man, and I'm not being, I'm like, what? Like, like what is going on?
Yeah.
So she's telling me the whole thing and how, they got to connect her with like these advocacy groups in the other state and
Yeah.
kind of help and this and that. And you could apply for financial help if you, just the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, exactly what you were thinking is, I would hate to have to make this decision,
Yeah.
right? And then look at what you have to go through in order to make this happen,
Right.
right? And then I look at not only what you had to do before, but during and now. Here's the after effect of it
Mm.
that you have to deal with as well.
Yeah.
And it's not that simple, right? It's not that simple of a thing. And
That's
then
right.
when we tie it into CBD and cannabis, here's the interesting thing, right? About 35% of all women are consuming cannabis, CBD, in
Mm.
some form or another, right? So, and about 7% of pregnant women are consuming it, right? So when you look at something in terms of my industry, it's not as if those, cannabis and pregnancy are mutually exclusive. There's a
Right.
lot of overlap, right? People have, this is part of their medicine cabinet. This is what they do. And so if they've got chronic illnesses, if they got things going on, this has always been their medication. And now this life-changing experience happens. You're not pregnant. What are you going to do? Some people choose not to anymore. They say, listen, I'm not going to, take my medicine anymore. And others say, hey, this is what I believe. I don't believe it. And each one of those choices comes with another set of options. If
Right.
you say you're not going to take your medicine anymore, then you have to deal with a life
Mm.
of the pain, the discomfort, whatever you were taking it for. You have to suck it up, or you have to go through the secondary options, which you had chose before that you weren't going to use, right? If you
Yeah.
say, I am going to take my medicine, then you put yourself in another zone, right? You primarily, and I always tell patients this, if you're pregnant and you have some sort of adverse birthing outcome, something bad happens, they're going to test your blood, right? And if there's weed, a THC in there, you open up a whole nother level of problems, right? Especially as
Ouch.
amongst minority women, you don't want child services in your life. You do not want that, right?
That's right.
And
That's right.
so
Especially
if
as a
you,
woman of color. Like
yeah,
the
you do
last
not.
thing you want, the last thing you want is Satan sitting in your living room or ACS sitting up in your parenting. That you don't want that. You don't want.
Exactly. So you
Mm.
do not want that whatsoever. And you also, as physicians, right, we do have a obligation to report any suspected use, right? So if we think you're abusing drugs or you're creating a lifestyle that is harmful to yourself or your child, or will be after their birth, we have a right to report that, right? And so you're leaving that kind of discretion up to some physicians who don't even understand. Right? Or even you got some old fuddy duddies. And so as we look at these two topics, the reproductive right topic and the cannabis and CBD topic, there's a whole lot of overlap, not only in the legality, the enforcement of the laws, the disproportionate effect of like prohibition and negative stereotypes and outcomes on people, women of color. There's the medical aspect of it in terms of people having the options to get the kind of medicine that they need. And also, as you mentioned earlier, I did a study on CBD and quality of life. We don't have long-term studies in terms of things like this, right? Like, how does this help me if I'm pregnant or if I'm going to terminate a pregnancy? Is this a viable pain relieving option for me, right? Like, how do I know? Are prescribers allowed to prescribe? Let's say I do have this procedure, a whole lot of pain, but I don't want morphine or Percocets or something else for the pain, right? Right. Do I have any options? Can I do something for my mood? And so these kind of things are really important going into this season because it makes a big difference in terms of how money's going to be allocated. It's going to make a big difference, like I mentioned, for research, law enforcement, criminal punishment. We're talking about quality of life. We're talking about medical options. And those two things do have a whole lot of overlap.
I appreciate that. That's an important breakdown. Dr. Damas, we actually have a caller on the line who has a question and a testimonial. Dee in Virginia, thank you for calling. What would you like to say this morning?
Good morning, Lurie. Good morning, Dr. Damas.
Good morning.
I have a question, but first a testimonial. Dr. Damas, your staff is beyond amazing. I'm sure you already know that, but I just have to add my testimonial to it. And of course, they would be amazing because you are so amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And so this story about the way that you stepped in to help a patient, and you did it personally, you didn't hand it off. After my consult with you in May, the way you coached me and prescribed the regimen that was necessary for me to go through the upcoming emotional ordeal that we talked about, and I've been following that since, but I made a mistake. I forgot to reorder because you doubled my dose. It has been effective, but I forgot to reorder in time. And so here I was the other day packing for a trip, and I was on my last dosage of CBD. I called your office. I emailed your office. Your wonderful, wonderful staff responded right away. Going to have my product. And because I have had the benefit of your guidance in how to use this medicine. I was anxious, but I didn't panic.
Good.
Wow.
Prior to this, I would have had to cancel the trip.
Oh, my God.
So that is my testimony to people that are suffering. There is other option than the 13 medications a day they had me on.
Jesus. Dee, thank you so much for
Thank
your
you, Dee. I'm so
call.
happy.
Wow. Dr. Damas, how does it,
She's making my heart beat
nobody says
fast.
that to lawyers, right? Nobody calls lawyers with that sort of gratitude. So I'm vicariously appreciating the love that she's sharing to you, because don't nobody ever call a lawyer with that sort of emotion. But obviously, the work you're doing is making a huge difference. Anything you want to say back in response to Dee before we continue this conversation?
Appreciate you. I really appreciate you, and I've been saying this all along, and I'm gonna say it to you, Lurie. Thank you for giving me this platform to speak to the audience for real talk, because obviously there's people that need this, and I'm happy to touch into my people, and it gives me purpose, and we enjoy what we do in the office. So like I always say, please call in. I always say that, like, it lets us know what we need to do, right? Because we're literally there to help And we all know, we say this in our meetings, all if it's not us, then who?
Yeah.
Like somebody's got to do this right. And so, it'll be us. Dee, thank you so much. Wow.
Yeah, no, that's special. That's special. And
Yeah.
when we're thinking about going back to the topic for today, the idea of reproductive justice and all the emotions that come into getting access to reproductive health care, this is a great topic for this time. So I'm really glad that this is where we're sitting the conversation today. So we've talked a bit about some of the history behind, or some of the legal complications that come when you're using cannabis or CBD during pregnancy. Obviously, we want to keep the law out of your uterus in every way, shape, or form. But when we're talking about, let's say, for example, someone has had to navigate an abortion, is there a role for CBD and cannabis to play in post-abortion recovery?
Yeah. And so just so people understand, if you're not really paying attention to this issue, you may miss some really significant bits of information, right? So about 18% of pregnancies end in abortion, for a number of reasons,
Wow.
right? Yeah. And
18%. Huh.
yep. So it's like 70, yeah. So 17, 18%. Young women make up most of them, right? So somewhere in their 20s, considered to be young. And then it's higher numbers in African American and people of color communities, right? So some of that you may have kind of, assumed. And so we have a specific population that's vulnerable, and there's reasons that they're vulnerable: financial, systemic things, right, that kind of keep you down, overall health, right? So when you grow up in lesser or lower socioeconomic status or places, the overall health of anyone that lives there is going to be poor. Things from smog, air pollution, water quality, food resources, all those things make your own health, but the health of any fetus or baby that you're carrying even more precarious. And so it's not just to kind of surmise what you said earlier, is that people are not just going out having abortions the way that they make it sound like it's some sort of contraception, right? There's serious reasons why people are going through this. And there are reasons why they have these serious things, like I just mentioned, food insecurity, poor air quality, poor water quality. You can't develop a fetus properly if you yourself are in poor health and your environment is poor health. Right? It's not going to happen. And so these decisions have to be made. And so making that decision then leads to these other things, as you mentioned earlier. How do you handle the after effects? Well, the number one, not the number one, but one of the primary things is the pain. There's going to be lots of pain, right, from that procedure. And usually you have your first line, analgesics, which are NSAIDs, Tylenol, and aspirin, and, those type of things, which usually are not effective. And sometimes you wouldn't even give like aspirin or like an ibuprofen because they can increase bleeding, right? So you just had a procedure, or you're not going to give a medication that increases your potential for bleeding or decreases your potential to form blood clots, which will stop that.
And from my
Right.
understanding, depending on whether or not you're having a surgical abortion as opposed to the medicinal abortion, the cramping that can come with the medicinal abortion. This is actually one of the reasons
Correct.
that people will sometimes choose a surgical abortion as opposed to a medicinal abortion, because you are going through the contraction of the uterus with the medical abortion in ways that are not necessarily, from my understanding, experienced when it comes to a surgical abortion. Also, mothers who are breastfeeding are often very concerned about the medical abortion, because that medicine that you take to trigger the abortion can also get into the breast milk. And there's some concern that mothers who are breastfeeding, because again, most of the people having abortion are already mothers. And so that's another reason that, there are a variety of reasons that might make you go with one route versus the other. But pain is part of both experiences, from what I understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's really well. You've been really, girl, you on top of it.
I can't be talking about reproductive justice. I don't know nothing about it. Between cannabis and reproductive justice and Project 2025 and just Black people being better, those are like the 4 topics that I talk about the most.
You are on top of it. You are on top of it. She did a great job, audience. So what she just said, I don't even need to go over it. But yeah. And so the good thing about that is that cannabis is an antispasmodic, right? So
Yeah.
CBD is a very strong antispasmodic. So we have women, for example, who use the CBD to help with their menstrual cramps, those with like fibroids or endometriosis, like they've already been using it to help decrease the amount of cramps. And then, of course, it helps with pain in general because it decreases the pain signals and your brain's interpretation of that. So very good, right? If you're just doing the CBD, for example, right, it's not going to alter your cognition. So you can still be lucid, you can still be cogent and still do what you got to do, but manage the pain, right? When you get into the THC side of things, that's where you can get, you will have your cognition altered and you can be high. Now, that comes into play sometimes because sometimes people do, for example, have things that they want to get off their chest and want to shut off their brain for a little bit and just like, I do not want to deal with this at all, right? Or I'm incapable at the moment, I'm incapable of dealing with this and I need a moment to bring the temperature down. And so, I tend to help try to find ways where people can fit in, get in where they fit in, what's most appropriate for them, right? Now, when it comes to some of the contraindications, yes, both CBD and cannabis are mild anticoagulants, meaning that they will increase your bleeding time slightly, but they're not major anticoagulants, right? So they're going to make you bleed out, or they're going to make you bruise easily. You're not going to become like a hemophiliac because you've had some CBD and cannabis. And so post-surgical or post-procedural, if you've had the surgical termination of the pregnancy, your chances, unless you're actively bleeding or you have some sort of complication, that it's a pretty safe medication profile for you post-procedural, and especially if you've done the medication assisted termination of pregnancy. You like the way I put that in real medical terms?
That was very medical, very linguistic. And my legal linguistic brain was able to follow. So this is progressing.
Sometimes the word abortion is just like very strong and harsh sounding. And so, right. And there's a lot of implications or things that are kind of like insinuated with it in terms of how it's been presented in the public discourse. So I kind of try to let me chill out with the triggering words.
Right? Go put the medicine in the applesauce. Medicine in the applesauce.
Yeah. Right. And it's
mildly intended.
And it's also really good for the mood part of it, right? I think the anxiety, the worry about just from psychological to your spiritual things, right? Did I do the right things? These are all things that need to be considered. And, again, going back to your original point, the idea that people are just doing this willy-nilly is like, I think it's so dismissive and disrespectful.
Yeah. I agree.
To think that people would subject themselves to this kind of stuff. Yeah, maybe there are some people there. Yeah, I mean, not maybe, there are probably a few here and there who are like, making really poor decisions and doing things, but that happens in all aspects of life. That ain't just, that's not just this, right?
I love it when people are like, some people just use abortion as birth control.
Birth control.
Okay. Well, if you ain't sleeping with her, why you care? Like, would you want someone who has that approach to be a parent of a child that they are? I mean, I feel like people are. What was it that Governor Tim Walz said is his policy? Mind your own damn business. There's one that mind your own damn business.
We respect our neighbors and we mind our own
mind our own damn business. Dr. Damas, I didn't realize this, but Dee from Virginia is still on. I was asking the team why. She actually has a question for you. So the testimonial was just part of it, but she also has a question. Dee, I'm so sorry. I did not realize that you were still holding on. I was so involved in this conversation. We have just a moment or two left. Can you quickly pose your question for Dr. Damas, and then he'll answer you on air?
I actually didn't realize I was still holding on. I was so into listening to you all. Again, I will email you, Dr. Damas. And I forgot to shout out Cecilia in your office. She is awesome.
I'm going to tell her that.
Shout out to Cecilia.
Shout out
all
to
right, Dee. Now hang up now. Somebody calling you, they're going to get a block. Well, I'm sure you got called. I was going back to the 80s for a minute when one call would be blocked because you were on the line. D,
There
thank you
was
for
only
being a
one,
part of the call-in family. I'm a Gen X kid. Sometimes, it comes
yeah.
back like a twitch. So, Dr. Damas, this current election, we've talked about this before, the MORE Act and other ways that federally the government is looking to provide expanded access to cannabis. Is there anything else we need to know? And I mentioned we have just a moment left, but is there anything else we need to know about legalization? Or I'm sorry, legalization issues as it pertains to either significant local elections like what you all have happening in Florida or at the federal level? Anything else we need to know?
I would say to everyone, it's really important that you educate yourself on these kind of issues because they make a big difference in our communities. We've been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, cannabis prohibition, and access to reproductive care impacts our community at higher rates as well, right? So when you got to go to Florida, to leave Florida and go to Colorado, that requires a significant amount of resources. And we oftentimes do not have those resources to spare. And so wealthy people are not really, their lives are not really affected by prohibition policies the way that those of us who've been on the other side of the wealth are affected, right? So just in Florida, we have both the right to abortion and the legalization of marijuana, both of them on the ballot this year. They're both polling really high. They need to get over 61% in order to pass. So, if these kind of things like individual autonomy, control over your body, the right to choose to do what you want to do with your body and not have anybody else tell you whether it's a procedure or whether it's medicine that you take, those are really important. Federally, we have two choices in candidates, one that wants to decriminalize and reschedule marijuana, the other one that wants to keep the same prohibition policies. So, Biden Harris are on the, descheduling and taking it as Schedule 3. You have Trump and Vance who want to keep the same onerous draconian thing. So throughout the state, I think this year there's about 32 measures throughout the country. Look into your local and your state, because those are going to be the first things for both positions, right? And make sure the candidates that you're voting for align with how you personally feel your principles are, because the more that we get involved in this, the harder it is for them to take away rights in the name of whatever they feel they're entitled to do with our bodies.
Imagine that. Our bodies, our choice really means a thing.
Yeah.
Dr. Damas, I'm always grateful for you giving us some of your time. And you, not only did you come up for the Cannabis CBD Town Hall, but you have, I think it's over a year now, you have been giving us every other week you come on, you help us understand the medicinal benefits of this medicine. And so as much as you are thanking me for giving you the platform, I am thanking you for taking advantage of this opportunity, because I learn so much from people like you, Dashida Dawson, Kevin Middleton of Cannabis Labs. I learned so much from you all. One day, I might just actually delve into this arena as opposed to just spreading information about it. One day, we'll see. But I'm grateful for you. And for people who want to do as D instructed, follow up with you, reach out to your staff, have a question for you. I actually need to place an order myself for your the CBD, the non-THC CBD gummies, which have been a part of our household's health regimen. So I'm going to place that order because I forgot to do it before I went on my trip. I came back and was like, oh, this is a problem. So what's the best way for people to connect with you, contact you? Because you have not just the products that are full CBD with no THC, no ability to get high, just the medicinal benefits, and you've got the other products as well. So for people who need to either consult with you or just get some information, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Right. So you can always hit us on the website, drdamas.com, drdamas.com, or you can spell it out, doctordamas.com. Call us, 833-362-3262, 833-362-3262. You can follow us on social media. The staff at SiriusXM Urban View always tags us in posts and stuff, so you don't even have to look it up. You can just see we're going to be tagged in there, and you can follow along. And if you make any purchases on the site, you got to put some respect on our hostess, our glorious hostess with the mostest. Say for the Divine Nine, holding it down, going to get us sister
shout out to the Soul
elected.
Ross.
Yeah, shout
Peace
out.
to the bros.
Put in code Lurie on the site, Lurie. Make sure you put some respect on it. And we are happy to share as much information as we can with you guys. So call in as much as you want. We're happy to talk to y'all.